we got a tape recorder which had a radio function, and late at night I would listen to a show called The Voice of America, and that's how I practiced my English, but also would get to hear world news, just a whole new world beyond what I was exposed to on a daily basis. So that really planted the seed of my dream to come and study to the US one day. And I got on a path of making that possible, primarily focusing on academics because that was really the only way, at least for my family, through which we could afford for me to even come to college here in the US. So I studied hard, got good grades. I got to the US and then made that dream real, but got on the more traditional path of getting through school, then getting a corporate job and starting to climb that corporate ladder of success because that's what success was painted to me as. So I just followed the steps. So I started climbing that corporate ladder. And after a few, I would call them somewhere events of adversity, which I can also speak about somewhere what people would call clues. I finally picked up the clues along the way. It wasn't the first one, but it took several. And I realized that I was climbing the wrong ladder. And at that point, I took a step back to reevaluate what is it that I really want to do. Some of these events were the Enron crisis and the 0809 crisis, then my own employer going through restructures. And those really left me feeling nervous and overwhelmed because I realized that I'm potentially looking at something that I cannot control, such as markets and corporate restructures. And I didn't want to be out on the streets or with a decimated retirement portfolio when I retire. That's when the seed of real estate, which I would argue was probably planted in me back in Bulgaria, which at the time being behind the Iron Curtain really didn't have any developed stock market or equity market. And so when people talked about investments, they really meant and discussed hard assets and not necessarily even cash flowing assets, but just being able to buy a home and own a home was considered a pretty big achievement. So I figured maybe I'll buy a single family house and rent it out. And over time, I will use that, I'll pay it off and effectively use that rental income as a way to build a small retirement. I live in California, and at the time, and even today, still, I would say it was very challenging to invest here because my primary goal with investment was cash flow. So unless you put a lot of money down, it's very difficult to buy a cash flowing property here. Plus, the price points here are pretty high. So naturally, that led me to look into investing out of state. So I made that very first step, which was nerve-wracking and scary, but looking back, I'm really glad that I did it. Before I knew it, one investment turned into another and then another, and that's when the light bulb went on. Wow, this is not just a small retirement nest egg. This can be a cash flowing business that can potentially be my option to retire from corporate America early. And so that's how I got started.